Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of 22 books to try and read in 2022. So of course I plan to try and read more than 22 books, and I say of course because it's my job to read books. But also I tend to focus mostly on fantasy, and also I like reading a lot of new fantasy releases. I like being able to fill you in on what's coming out, especially because new releases are so pricey and it's a lot of money. It's also not always super accessible to a lot of people who don't live in America or the UK. So I like filling you in on, hey, this is what this book is about, this is what it was like, and then you have a better idea of some of the anticipated releases you've been seeing and whether you want to spend your money on it. All that to say, I'm of course going to be reading a lot of fantasy books, but I do want to broaden my horizons here and there and not just read the same kinds of fantasy books that I tend to read. So I have a few books on this list that are more so fantasy horror leaning, but on top of that I have a mix of other genres as well. So for example, there are going to be 9 books on this list that are nonfiction. I recently did a video about some popular authors who I have not yet checked out and would like to, so I have some books from those authors on this list. I also have a couple of picks from my husband. I'm not going to go too in-depth with a lot of these works, but I wanted to give the heads up as kind of a goal for myself to check out more genres, and then especially, like I said, a lot of nonfiction. The first 2 I'll mention are my husband's picks for me. One of them is Sheriff of Babylon. This is a comic written by Tom King. I have read Vision by Tom King, but essentially nothing else. And this one is much more centered in real world events. My husband has informed me that it is very hard hitting, very impactful, and he thinks it's a masterpiece. So I'm very excited to jump into that. Very, very different from that, we have White Noise. So Sean has very interesting taste. He loves mangas, he loves comics, he loves literary fiction, and sometimes more abstract literary fiction, and this is one of those. So he has said that it's very funny but very strange. And if you're wondering what other kinds of literary fiction my husband likes to pick up, an example would be Gravity's Rainbow. If you know anything about Gravity's Rainbow, you know, you have an idea that paints a perfect picture for you. Now jumping into the 9 nonfiction books, a lot of these are about different topics, and so my goal with this is to not just dive into one single topic, but to be reading and try to inform myself a little bit more about a lot of different things that are going on. So one of them would be The New Jim Crow. This has been very highly praised. It is about how currently in America, at least, there are certain things put in place that have impacted Black Americans more so than others when it comes to imprisonment, specifically usually Black men. So a lot of you, I'm sure, have heard of Jim Crow, which was this horrible era in American history, as is a lot of eras in history, you know. But this idea is that there are still certain things in place that negatively impact this group more than others. I have several friends who have read this and said it's basically a must read. And when it comes to the justice system in America, it's something that I think a lot of us could know a little bit more about, so I'm looking to inform myself a little more. Next up, we have The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee. I believe this is an award-winning book that details the events involving Native Americans in America. I think it's a more history-oriented kind of nonfiction, and it's quite large. So this is one that I can imagine is not going to be the easiest to pick up. I might have to pick it up, read something else, pick it back up, read something else. It might be one of those kinds of books. I know even just looking into my own family tree and seeing one of on my father's side, we are part Native American, and even just seeing, you know, Trail of Tears survivor on one of their tombstones, that just hits, I don't know. This is just something I need to know more about, and I think it's going to be very heavy, but I don't know much more than what I was taught in school, and I think I want to continue my learning when it comes to this. Next up, we have Anthropocene Reviewed. I mentioned this in my video where I talked about popular authors I've never really read. So this is a collection of essays that are pulled, the information is pulled from a podcast that is, I guess, an award-winning podcast by John Green. John Green as in The Fault in Our Stars John Green. So I'm surprised. I'm like, wow, what a interesting, fascinating human being to have such different books out. Anyway, so this is one I want to read. It's about the current geological age we're in and how humans have impacted the planet. Something I don't really want to know more about because I think it's going to fill me with fury, which technically I think could be said about all of the nonfiction, but Empire of Pain, which follows the family that has been kind of the main catalyst for the opioid crisis in America. And there's things in the news that have some hope. They're somewhat promising, but I just really think I need to read this one. I can feel myself being frustrated already. The next one I think is going to be really interesting, the kind of book that feels like you're watching a documentary, and that would be The Secret Life of Groceries. I don't know much about grocery stores and how food gets to grocery stores, and something that most of us in our day-to-day lives we rely on. And apparently the book is written in a very funny way, but details information that the author has gained after years of research. And I just think it'll be really interesting and quite eye-opening. There's also a book called The Cubans that I would like to read. I have a shameful amount of knowledge of my own family history when it comes to my Cuban side. On my mom's side, my grandparents are both from Cuba, and they're very secretive. My grandpa especially just pretty much never talks about Cuba. My grandma would always say, oh, Cuba's so beautiful, but then that's about it. And I don't speak Spanish. I've just felt like I don't have this connection to my roots the way I would like. So I want to learn more about Cuba. Next up would be The Girl with Seven Names, which is a memoir following a woman who grew up in North Korea. I read a few memoirs in 2021 and I really enjoyed the reading experience. These are people that are extremely remarkable, and their willingness to share the challenges of their lives, I think it just kind of makes you a more empathetic person, but in a strange way also makes you feel more empowered. So this is one that, I never know how to talk about memoirs without sounding so self-centered, to be like, I hope reading about this girl and her difficult life makes me feel like I can do anything. Next up, we have Hood Feminism. This, I believe, is detailing a lot of the things that affect women in poverty, that affect women in inner cities, the kinds of things that sometimes don't get discussed, and they're more about the basics in life that a lot of people go without, and what we can do to try and help other people who are in really difficult situations. Last of the nonfiction is Why We Sleep. I was hoping to read this in 2021. I'm planning on reading it in 2022. My sleep schedule was definitely not great in 2021 or 2020, but it has been becoming a little bit more set. I think I will be less horrified to read some of the things that are in this book now that I'm getting a little bit better with my sleep schedule. But everything I've seen of this, there are some alarming studies involving sleep and lack of sleep. And I think that I'm going to end up reading this and being like, oh my gosh, why have I been not sleeping enough all these years? Jumping now into some of the other genres, we have 3 romance books I'm hoping to read. I might swap in a different one, we'll see, but the 3 I have would be Bringing Down the Duke. This is one that is set in a different time period, and the cover's all cutesy, and it was one of my Book of the Month books at one point, so I was like, okay, I'll try that one. We also have Beach Read, which I think follows 2 people who end up, or is that people we meet on vacation? I don't know. I'm planning on reading Beach Read, though. And then we have The Ex-Hex, which I don't know a whole lot about, but it seems like a cute one to try to pick up in the Halloween season, because while a bunch of other spooky things I might end up picking up around Halloween, I might potentially also want to read something cute to not be as scared. Speaking of being scared, the 2 fantasy horror books I'm hoping to read would be Mexican Gothic. The other one I'm hoping to read would be Helm of Midnight. I'm actually kind of scared about this one. I think it is going to be scary. I've heard that it's scary but manageable, and I am a pansy. So hopefully it is manageable. I read some fantasy horror in 2021 and I liked it, but it was young adult. And I'm like, do I dare? I think I shall. We also have Razorblade Tears. I had hoped to read this last year, didn't get the chance. It follows 2 men whose sons have died, and these men are ex-criminals. They band together to try to get vengeance. The next 4 books are the ones that I mentioned in a video recently about popular authors that I haven't read yet but want to. I already mentioned the John Green book earlier, so the next 4 I'm just going to go straight through. We have Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. We have Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. A Shadow in Summer by Daniel Abraham. And Foundation by Isaac Asimov. The last book on the list, correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm planning on picking up Atlas 6. I think this was initially self-published and then has been picked up, and then I think even now is going to be getting an adaptation. I've heard people who don't always have the same thoughts on books end up really being surprised and loving this, and that's always exciting and promising for me when I see, oh, those people, they have very different tastes and they all seem to be liking this book. I've just heard it's really great and it's a very character-focused book, which I hear that and I instantly get excited. Fingers crossed I can get to all of them. Let me know what books are definites you really want to get around to, or maybe some books that aren't your typical types of reads that you're hoping to pick up. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.